Hello, I'm Toycat, and it's a good day to be pro-China because the largest opposition party in Hong Kong has announced its plans to dissolve. This Democratic Party was the biggest party in favor of free and fair elections, and sadly they are going to shut down because as of the Patriot Law in 2021, only people regarded as loyal to the communist regime in Beijing can serve as lawmakers or local councillors in the semi-autonomous territory. This law has effectively barred the Democratic Party from taking part in elections, and so the biggest opposition party is just going to disband. How does this happen in a system that is meant to allow for true democracy? Because that is technically what Hong Kong is. Well, the simple explanation is that Hong Kong was never really owned by the British. And I'm not making a point that you can never own anything, man. I'm making a point that the Hong Kong island, as well as the island of a little bit of Kowloon, was actually owned by the British because they defeated China in the First and Second Opium War. And we'll just ignore the fact that, like, can you own a piece of territory because you win a war? It feels wrong, but let's just say the UK owned it on had a legal basis for owning it. However, to enforce its control of the area, the UK leased additional land known as the New Territories, promising to return them to China in 99 years. That was in 1898, and the logic was 99 years is forever from now. However, 1997 eventually happened, and so what happened then? Simply put, Hong Kong could have just ended up split in half, with the New Territories being handed back to China and the other half remaining in British hands. This would have allowed Hong Kong to remain as full and free as it was before, but it would have also led to huge security issues, and there's a real concern that China, being a rising power on the world stage at the time, could have just chose to invade the rest of it, or indeed blockade it in some way. Effectively, you would have destroyed the lives of the people of Hong Kong either way if you let the territory split in two and lapse, and so the British agreed, okay, even though we own this territory in perpetuity, let's give it back to China. It's a better look for us on the world stage. And so what was the agreement in exchange from China? Well, there was a long negotiation. It literally lasted over 15 years, and what was agreed was that China would govern Hong Kong and own Hong Kong, but they would do it under the principle of one country, two systems. This would allow the city to enjoy a high degree of autonomy, except in foreign and defense affairs, which they mostly did. Hong Kong still, to this day, uses a separate currency to the rest of China. The yuan or the renminbi is you're kind of prone to manipulation from China, you can say, but Hong Kong gets to pick its own currency, which is much more stable. Hong Kong has its own borders, which are very differently controlled than China's. Hong Kong has its own legal system, and so on and so on. And just like they promised, Hong Kong has multiple political parties and freedom of assembly and speech. Depending on how tightly you interpret freedom in that sense, because this was the rule that was meant to last for 50 years. Hong Kong and China and the UK came together and agreed on this, and for the first few years it was looking really good. Hong Kong as a part of China, but also a free part of China, was actually really beneficial for both sides. Hong Kong people got to keep their freedom, and people in China were feeling like Hong Kong would now become the logical gateway to coming into China. Opening up in the Chinese market is terrifying for most people, rightly so, but if you open in Hong Kong first, you have your entry point. Hong Kong served both parties' interests, in other words, except eventually China started saying weird things like this. They said the Sino-British Joint Declaration, the treaty that we signed, was a historical documentary that has no significance anymore. In other words, they said, yeah, we signed a document saying we wouldn't do some things, but we signed it in the 90s. Do you expect us to live up to what we said in the 90s? I don't trust anything that comes from the 90s, especially not YouTubers. And so what they basically said was, yeah, even though Britain thinks the declaration is in force and is a valid treaty, we don't. And you know what happens when two parties don't agree to a treaty? The treaty doesn't work anymore. Whoopsie, how about that? And then, again, in another big whoopsie, by accident, they signed quite a few national security laws. The first one was to allow just simple extradition from Hong Kong to China, which was breaching Hong Kong's, independence in that way. And then they started signing more draconian ones, we could put simply, that, yeah, now the government has powers to crack down on all forms of dissent on the grounds of alleged treason, espionage, sedition, and other external interference. And the most ridiculous of all of them is the fact that China, as of 2017, has decided that it should be able to control the candidates, something it did especially in 2021 when it passed the Patriots Law, where now you've got to be a patriot to your country. And what's your country if you live in Hong Kong? Well, you have your own system, but your country is this big red flag here. And so as a result, what's going to happen to you? Yeah, if you oppose Beijing, you don't get to run in elections because people might vote for you. Is that how democracy is meant to work? No, that's, I think, quite fairly so, right? But is that how it works in China regardless? Yes. As a result, China has a situation where if we look at their elections, again, I think this is beyond fascinating. If we look into, just after independence, where Hong Kong was like, at the peak of its, oh, we really might be the first bit of democracy in China. We might be the part of China that proves that democracy works. Because, you might know in Hong Kong they speak a different language, but you might not know why. This is the Guangdong region of China. It's formerly known as Canton, and so the language they speak in Canton was Cantonese, which included this area here. This is why Hong Kong speaks a different language to the rest of China, but even within the Cantonese language group here, on both sides of the river, if you look at this area, it's a prosperous region for China. However, the difference in incomes between Hong Kong and the Canton region is one of the reasons why so many people are drawn to the city. Hong Kong being democratic, Hong Kong being open, Hong Kong allowing for experimentation and capitalism, and being so successful is something that at first was a great boon to China, but then became a bit of a threat, especially as the one-party system in China has started to really want to harden its rule. They realized that having a gateway to China is awesome, but having a gateway to China that makes China look like the worst market for business and the worst market for freedom is a bad sign for their people. And so ever since the Democratic Party's big wins just after the elections, they got 31% here. Also, the first election they got 42%, kind of crazily. If you look into the many parties they have in Hong Kong, you can see that they're split between pro-democracy or pro-Beijing, very close to 50-50, but this 50-50 split between we like China and we don't like China is something that puts you on edge if you're a one-party system that believes that you should have the final say, because what if you have the final say and people don't like it and they elect other people? That's not having the final say at all. And so over time there's been slow nudges to make sure people are more pro-Beijing, but in 2021 every single candidate had to be pro-Beijing, with just one moderate member, not pro-democracy, just kind of understands both sides, which is the third side's Xi Yuan here. And so as a result there is 89 candidates who are, pro-Beijing, and one candidate who's like, let's keep an eye on this thing. And so, as a result, now Hong Kong has elections and not elections. You still get to choose which flavor of pro-China you want, for now. You still get to choose exactly which way you want Hong Kong to lean towards Beijing, but there is now no longer the option of should Hong Kong have its rights and its freedoms. The options now are how much should we be in favor of China. And I do think that this is an interesting case of, I mentioned in my map video from yesterday, like, oh yeah, people are, I don't just think it's a dumb decision to focus on the political capital of renaming things, whether that be gulfs or mountains. A lot of people make a big deal about this because they see it as an easy win. But also, if you acknowledge that if you just have the power, you get to rename things, then yeah, if you have the power, you get to rename that this island isn't Taiwan, it's China. If you have the power, this isn't Hong Kong, the special British overseas territory that represents one of the most futuristic and future-forward cities in the world. No, this is a part of China. And if it's a part of China, why isn't China allowed to enforce its election system there? Or rather, its lack of election system. Isn't it incredible that they let them have elections whatsoever? The difference in whether you see this as Hong Kong or whether you see this as China Part 2 really does shift the global opinion on what China gets to do there. And this is something which I think is important for everyone to realize, that sadly, the systems of government that we use for enacting our populism have to enact on a week-by-week basis of, let me show you some things that I've done. I need you to, I'm only going to be here for 4 years till you decide to switch to another party. But the one-party systems that they use in many authoritarian countries these days, or at the very least the one-leader system, let's say if we look to the north here, but the one-party systems are allowed to play the very long, slow game of slowly but surely moving the world to being on board with their opinions, which is why we see, perhaps, substantial portions of an innocent country being lost. Who's to say which part of Eastern Europe I'm pointing at right now? But this is the reason that we're seeing a substantial loss in freedom in the world, is because as we have to bicker on things on a week-by-week basis, the one-party world has no cares for elections. They just know that they can slowly but surely move things in their direction, and that's why we should be insisting that, okay, even though we have multiple parties, what stable goals can we agree between us? Let's work on those. Let's not work on things that we absolutely know will be reversed in 5 years anyway. But, you know, that's my take. How you can take I think in the same way that the beautiful thing about capitalism is that you can incorporate critiques of capitalism into capitalism. One of the beautiful things about democracy should be that we can incorporate the systems of countries that aren't being democratic. We should be able to work out how we can make how we can make our systems function better against those, because we can change ours in a way that is hopefully more effective than they can change theirs. We have the power in a way that you don't have if you live in most of China, and nowadays most of Hong Kong, and I hope that we take advantage of that, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video, because second channel, I'm gonna go get a lobster. Do you want to see where I'm getting a lobster roll? I'm going to a very fancy place to get a lobster roll. And if you want to know something even weird, I learned it's like this is one of those ridiculously expensive department stores in the UK. I don't understand the appeal of a department store at all, but they have lobster rolls in here, and I just want to share because it's a Sunday as I'm recording this, and as you're hopefully watching this, they open at 11:30 on Sundays, but because of trading laws, you're only allowed to sell things for I think 6 hours a day in the UK. You can go in and look at 11:30, but you can't make any purchases till 12. The store is in view only mode, and I don't know, is that fun to anyone else? It's fun to me, okay? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, because I'll see you... Wait. So look at this, by the way. I'm in London. And then look at this. I'm going to go all the way across the world, 14 hours flight away. You know, bear in mind how fast the flight goes. And I'm going to go to a random street in the middle of Kowloon. And look at it. Isn't this cool? I know. I really do think, like, Hong Kong is like cyberpunk London. And that their election system even represents it. Like, you might not know this, but you have to elect like industrial professionals, people from the labor services, religious. I think it's incredibly interesting the way their system worked. But yeah, I guess not for long. Enjoy it while you can. If you're a tourist, I think everyone has said like pretty generally that like the best days of Hong Kong are behind it. However, you know, the truth is like there is still a Hong Kong here. And there's only a matter of time until it becomes a weird historic relic. Just like how if you go to Berlin... Okay, I'm sorry. I need to get these videos back under control and length. But yeah, if you go to Berlin, you can see the Berlin Wall, but there's no longer a Berlin Wall. It sucks. You can't go to the communist side of the city. If you were a pro-communist person, that would suck. Like, oh, now if I want to go to the communist side of the city, I've got to spend my money. And I don't know, you'd have to spend it if it was communist too, but you get the idea. If you want to go to Woman Honey... that is what that means, right? Woman honey. If you want to go to Woman Honey, it's going to be expensive because it's merged with the capitalist side now. Anyway, thank you for watching. Second channel. Don't care. Bye.